Today we're trial fitting the components that make up the turret basket and the turret floor. The purpose of the turret floor is so that all of the crew members within the tank can remain in situ when the turret's traversing in relation to the gun and carry out their jobs. Some components on it, there's the floor ring, which is the red component at the bottom. We've got turret heel guards which run around the outside. These prevent the crewmen getting their feet caught in the traverse. Give them a guide as to where their feet should be when the turret's traversing. There's also one of the shields here. This fits on the side of the turret heel guard and bolts to the upper turret ring. It contains the shroud that hides the hydraulic pipes for the power traverse. There's a couple of areas of paint here that we've saved. One to match the original, and the other one's got an old drawing on it which we're trying to work out, but we don't want to paint over it, so we've masked that off, and there'll be a stowage box that goes over this when the turret is complete. The turret floor itself then is made from wood and it's encapsulated in a metal shroud. The original on this side, which we want to save, and a replacement which we've made for the underside. The reason we've done this is because the wooden floor on the original turret had rotted and sagged, and this had had the effect of stretching the metal that was underneath, and that was then starting to foul all the electrical cables and the hydraulic pipes that run underneath this component. So this has been made from new. What we need to do now is obviously we will paint over that to preserve it and make sure that it doesn't go rusty, and glue the original side to the wood in order to take out some of the wrinkles. One important component I want to point out is this little bracket here with a notch in it. That engages in the rotary base junction at the upper half of it and makes sure that as the turret goes round, the upper half of the RBJ goes round with it, and you'll see that in situ when it's fitted. Talking of which, the turret floor, when it is fitted, simply sits flat down inside the turret ring. As we've mentioned before, the gear system on this tank is air assisted. In order to provide that air, there's a compressor that sits in between the two engines in the engine bay. That delivers air to this reservoir. From the reservoir there's a tap in that runs off it to the driver's dash panel that gives a pressure reading as to how much air is in the system. There's another one via a stopcock that goes around the turret floor and into this air servo here, made by Clayton Dewander. And this is the bit that does the assisting when the driver presses down on his gear selection pedal and works a whole new set of linkages all the way back to the transmission. We don't have the compressor in because we don't have the engine in at the moment, so what we can do is via this Schrader valve that's mounted on this tap in here, we can block off the feed from the compressor, and we can charge this cylinder up and test the rest of the system. To do that, we're just using a normal tire inflator on the Schrader valve. What I'm doing now is watching the gauge on the driver's dash panel and getting it up to about 80 psi. So we've got the pressure up to 80 psi. Before we do the test on the air servo, I just want to go through the operation of a gear change in the normal way that the driver would do it. If you remember from when I spoke about driving the vehicle in Australia, the gear selector doesn't physically change the gears. What it does is it tells the gearbox the next gear that the driver is likely to have. So for example, if I want no neutral now and I want to move the tank forward, I'll put it into extra low or first. The tank won't move at this stage because all I've done is told the gearbox what gear I want next. In order for the gearbox to select that gear, I've got to operate the foot pedal, the selector foot pedal on the left hand side here. When I press that, that brings into operation the air servo. The air is delivered into the piston in the air servo, the linkages come into play and actually do the gear changing at the rear of the tank. If I want to select another gear, I'll just move the gear stick forward and then I operate the pedal and the gear change takes place in the normal way. The thing to remember, as I said from driving it down under, is that if you want to get all the way back to neutral and you're in 5th gear, you've got to work your way all the way back down through the gear ratios, 1 gear at a time. You cannot skip change without doing damage to the gearbox. Having checked the air supply, I can now test the system for operation. I've had to disconnect some linkages in order for this to happen, because in order to do it properly through the foot pedal, the whole system has to be connected, and we're not ready for that yet. But I can demonstrate how it works. So the driver presses down on his pedal, the gear selector goes back. When he releases the pedal, the valve opens and the piston reasserts itself. This is one of the oil coolers that's mounted on the engine. 2 of them in all. Their function is to obviously cool the oil when the engine's running. The way that's done is the oil pump on the scavenge side, once it's coming up from the engine, it's delivered to these manifolds. The oil runs down through and it's cooled by the air acting on the fins that you see on the 6 towers in front of me. One important feature of the oil cooler that's still repeated today on modern tanks is the fact that it's mounted on trunnions. You'll see them either side here. What that does, it gives the facility to be able to lift the oil cooler up if you want to look at something underneath, and then when you've finished you can stow it in the horizontal position, the decks can go down and everything's neatly tucked away. One of the tests that we have to carry out on this is to make sure that the oil's not going to leak. Thankfully on the trunnions they're threaded, so that means that we can put end caps and an air delivery system on the other side and pressurise the inside of the oil cooler and make sure that there are no air escapes. With a blanking plug fitted and the air supply on the left hand side, just use a normal foot pump to pressurise the inside of the oil cooler. I'm going to take it up to about 70, the reason being that the engine oil pressure is about 80 when it's normally running. And this is the scavenge side of the pressure pump, so it doesn't need to be that high. Okay, once I've got it up to 70 psi in this case, I'll walk away for a bit, come back, and after about 20 minutes, hopefully the needle won't have moved.